family vacations. Any fun ones?
Well, remember when we took the Tanya and we got slept in the schoolyard?
Oh, I wouldn't call it a vacation necessarily.
It didn't turn out to be a vacation, for sure.
Keno was on his mission, and we needed to go to a small town in northern Washington. And we had a girl with us from Russia who was an exchange student. So it was our two girls, Digby, me, and Tanya, the girl. And so we drove up through Chelan, and it was getting kind of late, and we were saying, the girls were saying, Dad, don't you think we should get a motel? And he's going, oh, no, 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 we'll get to this town up there, and we'll find one farther up. Well, farther we got, the later it got, and we get up to this little town, and I think it's probably midnight or thereabouts, no place to stay. So we had a Aerostar van, and we found this school, and we parked in the schoolyard right next to the building, and then it started raining. The kids were sleeping on the floor and in the seats, and I was trying to sleep in the front seat. Amy was sitting next to me, and she somehow kept putting her foot on the brake. Digby was sleeping on one of the benches that came from the car out under the eaves. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, a police officer came up. What are you people doing here? So that one, that was a funny one. We were really tired though too.
That's good. Digby, tell me about your parents. What were your parents like?
Rough.
In what way? Let's talk about your mom and then your dad.
Every way. My dad was uneducated. He couldn't even hardly sign his name. And they had a terrible marriage. It was one of those kinds, you know, every hollering all the time, and so us kids learned to take off. When they're going to have an argument, we just took off because we heard enough of it. And so it changed. You know, to say I had a good start would be wrong, but to say that I got cried over it would be wrong too. What I did is decided to make up my mind to be different, and I think that was the closest thing I ever came to having a parent, was that every once in a while you couldn't even hug them. They weren't that kind. So every once in a while, if I got a hug, I thought it was payday, you know. But I had parents that were. My mother had 7 children, and my father worked, but he didn't get much work, so she held down 2 jobs. So I had to always remember what was on her plate, and not be judgmental. And so that's kind of how it turned out, but it wasn't, I don't remember ever being taught anything from those parents. What I learned on the streets.
Were you close to your brothers and sisters?
Yes, I was. I'm not sure. We kind of hung together because of the circumstances, but some of them went the way my mother went, you know, and I was just as determined to go the opposite direction. But mostly though, for work ethic, my mother was a hard worker, and we learned that, and it saved us. You know, I could always get a job, because when I had a job, I always kept it. I worked hard, kept my mouth shut, and that's supposed to be what they needed at the time. But
what did your mom do for work?
she is a seamstress for Eaton's of Canada, which is a big department store, and she cleaned the building for commercial buildings. And I often would go with her. That's why I know that, because she was so tired she could hardly keep her eyes open, and so I'd go to help her at night from school, and that's how I got to know her. And she had a very rough life herself, but she never learned from it. That's honest, I guess.
Did you meet your grandparents or get to know them very well?
I got to know one of them, my Grandpa Stacy, and he was a great guy. He was in 3 different worlds. He was a batman. He's in the English Army, a batman first. And then he did World War I, and he lied about his age in World War II to become a cook. So we kind of loved Grandpa Stacy, because he was kind, and he had an eye for what was going on, and he gave us words of encouragement.
That's good.
Yeah.
Honey, tell me about your family. What was it like growing up, and what were your parents like?
My parents were pretty fun. My mother was strict and everything, but we always knew that she loved us and wanted the best. She wanted us to work hard in school and all this kind of stuff. And my dad was a very creative man. During World War II, he wasn't allowed to join the military because military put word out that they had another need for him, and he was the one who electrically, I guess you could say, figured out how to wire up these big silos over in the Moses Lake, Soap Lake area so that the airmen could learn how to navigate by the stars. Only the stars were lights inside these big things, whatever they were.
Wow.
And so he was a creative man, and he had the first television reception in Kittitas County, or east of the mountains, when the people here in Seattle said it couldn't be done. You can't get TV over those big mountains, but he did. And then he always rode a horse, so I always had a horse, and we just had a lot of fun, you know. And my grandma lived right across the field from us, and it was a fun growing up.
They were the opposite of my parents.
Yeah.
They were everything they should be.
Yeah.
But I want to just mention when Bonnie's dad was going to the fact of not being able to get into the services, he finally got a call to show up in Moses Lake at an employment office, and he sat him down. There was 4 or 5 people in the room, and they said, "You wondered why you can't get into the service, Mr. Morrison?" He said, "Yeah, I have," because he says, you know, he's healthy and strong. He said, "We'll tell you later, but right now we want you to answer some questions." So they had a guy who was a plumber and a guy who was I forget what they called it, but he did hydraulics and those kind of things, an electrician, and they had another man who was there to see what the capabilities of Bonnie's dad was. And when they got done, he said, they all looked at each other and said, "This is our man." And they put him to work. And Bonnie's dad, in fairness, was a genius. He invented stuff, he fixed stuff, he just had that kind of a mind. And so they figured that out, and so he was there till the war ended.
Do you see any of the traits of your parents in your grandchildren? Are those traits going down generation to generation?
Well, one funny thing about it is that on my mother's side of the family, they're from Yugoslavia and Switzerland, Czechoslovakia, places like that, which sometimes are commonly called bohunks. And so bohunks have this certain personality that goes with them. Maybe kind of a stubbornness, and so our son gives himself leeway for some things he wants to say or do by saying it's the bohunk in me. So that I see coming down the line. But I say, well, that's not an excuse. But other than that, I guess I think my dad would be proud of all of them. He only got to meet our 3 kids, never anybody else.
I should really mention that there's a whole town full of bohunks, if you want to call it that. And they were different. If you said to them, "How's your kids doing?" "Why do you ask?"
Yeah.
What
do you want to know for?
What do you want to know for? They're very secretive. They came from a police state and brought it with them. Mm-hmm. And they were very private people, and if they had even the inkling that you were asking about their family, they'd shut you down. It's kind of an interesting place.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about the joy your grandchildren have brought you.
Oh my goodness, they are, all of them, they're all best friends with one another. There's 15 kids. And from the littlest, who's 5, to the oldest, who's almost 20, they're all best friends. And when they get together, we always get hugs and everything like that. And they are playing and talking. There's never fighting, never squabbling. And that's what we just absolutely enjoy. And they're all smart. They're honor students and just top notch. We have the best.
Kind of like your family. You know, I felt the same way. They're all smart kids and nice kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Digby's had a life of service, and you've had a life of service. Tell me what service has meant to you in your lives.
Well, probably, as you know, I'm in charge of a bunch of people that make things for people who need it. And so that's been a pretty fun challenge, because you know that you're making something for someone you'll never meet most of the time. And you just know that it's going to help them get better, feel better, when you don't ever even see them. So, and to encourage other people to feel the same way, it's been very rewarding.
I think my life of service came first from my family. The one thing that I did learn is that when we had to reach out to people that were exemplary. By that I mean that they had to be different than us, so we could step up. And that's the kind of way it turned out for me, and that's probably why I ended up serving people as I do, because I just naturally love them. And I know that I never had that, so I try wherever I go to give them a little piece of myself. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but mostly it does.
I think he looks for people to help. That's kind of who he is.
What is your most prized possession, Digby? Material thing, the most prized possession you have or have ever owned?
Material, if you include my family, is my blessing.
No, not other than your family.
Well,
something you're proud of, something you like a lot.
I think it revolves around when I first went to work. I was 16 years old, and my dad said, "I'm tired of feeding you, go to work." And I thought education was good, so I had to go to night school and to get myself up to at least to a grade of 10 or 11, and then finally I had to get the GED. But I remember that it was both bitter and sweet. When I was told to go out of school, I was pretty unhappy.
But let me tell you how quickly he got the GED. We were going to take a real estate broker's test, and we found out on Friday night that the test was going to be the following week, and that you had to have a high school diploma, and he didn't have one. So Monday morning he went to Central Washington University and said, "I understand I could get my GED here." And they said, "Yes, we're giving the test tomorrow morning. So here's this little study guide." So all he did was study Monday evening, and Tuesday morning he went and aced the test, just like that. So he has that certificate, and I think it shows that he's capable of doing anything he decides he wants to do. Are you proud of that possession?
Yeah, I think that is the fact. I learned that I could learn. It was difficult, it was harder than most, but what you possess comes hard. And if you don't sacrifice, it doesn't mean much.
Bonnie, any prized possessions?
Probably pictures of ancestors and things like that. Because, you know, as we're saying that what our kids are doing now with their kids, we have to realize that maybe some of what we are came from our ancestors. Because you hear about, you know, your Aunt Polly or your Uncle Joe or your Uncle Johnny and things like that. So I think to be able to look at the pictures and know that's who they were, I like that a lot.